The Water is Wide by Pat Conroy is the book I chose for this project. I selected this book because I wanted something fun to read, but also something with a strong message. Prior to choosing this book, I read a passage from it and could tell by the way Mr. Conroy writes that his sense of humor would be something I could appreciate. Mr. Conroy is the oldest of 7 children and was raised in a military family. The Conroys moved 23 times before Mr. Conroy's 18th birthday. His father was both physically and emotionally abusive to all of the children, and this is reflected in much of his writing. Mr. Conroy graduated from the Citadel in the late 60s and took a job as a teacher on Daufuskie Island off the coast of South Carolina. This was a very poor black community and the basis for this book. Mr. Conroy was fired from this job after his first year there for his refusal to practice corporal punishment and personal differences he had with administration. The Water is Wide is about Mr. Conroy's adventure on Yamacraw Island. He had been teaching at a local high school, and after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., he began to be affected more by race relations. He said in the book that the shadows of white guilt hovered over him, so he rallied for a course in black history. Although it was approved, it wasn't well received, and Mr. Conroy himself said the course was a joke. He was in search of something he could do to make the world a better place when one of his friends told him about a job on Yamacraw Island. His friend inquired about the job, and administration didn't take him seriously, so both Conroy and his friend applied to the Peace Corps. His friend was accepted, but Conroy wasn't, so he pursued the Yamacraw job once again and succeeded in getting it. Yamacraw Island, as was the real-life Daufuskie Island, was basically cut off from the rest of the world. Only poor blacks lived there, and they subsisted on very little. They were uneducated, illiterate, and didn't trust white people. The school administrators responsible for this island were all white, and they didn't really care about the education of the island children. So when Conroy showed concern about their welfare, that stirred up trouble at every turn. Mama Brown was the other teacher on the island. She was black, but she saw herself as different than the people on the island. In fact, she professed to be part Native American. She called the children babies and told them they were lazy, called them retarded, and said they couldn't get ahead in life. She didn't believe in anything fun and whipped the children constantly. And although she had been teaching on the island for a while, none of the children could read or write, and very few could count or recite the alphabet. Another issue at the time was that desegregation of schools was still very new, and not everyone embraced the idea. During his time on Yamacraw, Mr. Conroy arranged a few trips off-island for the children, and the communities they visited were very welcoming. They housed the black children in their white homes, and the white and black children interacted well together. However, arranging the trips was not always easy. The all-white school administration didn't necessarily approve of the trips, and certainly weren't going to fund anything. So Mr. Conroy had to count on the generosity of others to help with travel, food, transportation, housing, and everything else. Also, he had to convince the parents of the black children to allow them to leave the island. Many of the children had never been off the island, and the parents weren't sure they should let their kids go. In the end, Mr. Conroy was able to convince the parents that it was a good idea for the kids to be exposed to life off the island. Ultimately, the problems in this story centered around equal education for black children. The fact that these kids were on an island, away from the general population, made it easy for them to be forgotten and neglected. I think the white administrators felt that as long as there was a school and a teacher on the island who would do whatever administration dictated, that was sufficient. It didn't matter to them that the kids weren't learning and would never be able to live successful, productive lives off the island. That wasn't their concern. All it took for change to start happening was one caring person to come along and speak for these kids. Mr. Conroy genuinely cared about them and really devoted his life that year to teaching them. He quickly discovered that he may not be able to teach all of them how to read or write, but he could teach them to appreciate music, socialize with others appropriately, speak for themselves, and other basic life skills that they otherwise may not have ever learned. He also made an impact on some of their families by proving to them that some white people do care and really want to help. I think all of these factors are important when looking at higher education as well. Many students are first-generation students in college and come to college without having the benefit of family to help them through this experience. This is where the experience of higher education professionals can really help these students by guiding them through this time and helping them succeed. Like Mr. Conroy, our caring will go a long way in helping students work their way through school and be able to earn their degrees and be productive citizens. Mr. Conroy's message about diversity really points to how people should work together for the common good, regardless of color or social status. He illustrated how we all have things that we can learn from one another, and by working together, everyone benefits. The kids in this story learned about things they might never have if someone who cared hadn't come along. Mr. Conroy learned how to make things happen even if administration wasn't supportive. The families of the children learned how to trust white people, and people of Mr. Conroy's community had the opportunity to interact with the kids and offer kindness and hospitality, showing the kids that others really do care about them. If I had a chance to interview Mr. Conroy, I would probably ask him about what happened on Daufuskie Island after he left. I'm curious about what the kids are doing now and wonder if what he started was able to continue so that the kids and families there aren't so isolated from the rest of the world today. I wonder if any of the kids he taught have gone on to be teachers or if they've been able to make positive impacts on their island. Ultimately, the way the message from The Water is Wide translates to higher education today is that inclusion is key. We don't need to concern ourselves so much with each other's differences, but focus on educating all of our students. If there are barriers to accomplishing that, we need to take steps to remove those barriers by providing services to students with special needs, financial aid to those who can't afford school without it, counseling, academic advising, peer support, and a positive social environment. If you enjoy a good book that makes you feel happy, mad, angry, sad, and then happy again, I highly recommend reading The Water is Wide.